You have 7 minutes to correct this mistake. Vanessa Reed's voice was calm enough to disappear beneath the low hum of the courthouse garage, but something in the way she said it made Officer Eric Pike pause. Only for a second. Then the doubt vanished behind the confidence of his uniform. Beside him, Sergeant Lauren Pike folded her arms and studied the black woman standing next to parking space 12 as though the answer had already been decided. Above them, 6 floors higher, more than 80 people waited inside courtroom 5. Attorneys organized exhibits. Reporters checked their notes. Families whispered beneath the carved state seal. At the center of the room, the judge's bench remained empty. Natalie Shaw, the courtroom clerk, glanced at the clock and quietly asked the bailiff whether Judge Vanessa Reed had entered through another door. No one knew that the woman they were waiting for was standing directly beneath them, her phone held by Lauren, her briefcase resting on the concrete, and a pair of restraints secured around her wrists. Vanessa looked again at her watch. 8:53 a.m. 7 minutes until the session began. Eric followed her gaze and gave a humorless smile. You should be more concerned about where you're going next. Vanessa did not answer immediately. The garage smelled of rain, motor oil, and cold concrete. Fluorescent lights flickered across rows of government vehicles, while a security camera marked G4 watched from the ceiling with a small red light. Vanessa had noticed it the moment Lauren approached her. She had also noticed the sign mounted in front of her car. Reserved. Judge Vanessa Reed. Her name was printed in letters large enough to read from 20 feet away. Lauren had not bothered. She had seen a black woman step from a dark sedan in a restricted section and decided the rest before asking a single useful question. Vanessa had shown identification. She had pointed to the sign. She had requested a routine verification through dispatch. Each answer had been treated not as evidence, but as another reason to distrust her. Now Eric stood between Vanessa and the elevator, while Lauren examined the judicial parking permit on the windshield as if staring long enough might change the name printed on it. This permit could belong to anyone, Lauren said. Vanessa turned her eyes toward her. It belongs to the person named on the permit. Lauren's expression tightened. In the courtroom above, Natalie lifted the phone and called Chambers again. No response. The bailiff, Thomas Green, looked toward the private entrance with growing concern. Judge Reed was known for arriving early. She had never missed a scheduled appearance. Down in the garage, Vanessa heard a faint burst of radio traffic from Lauren's shoulder microphone. A dispatcher asked whether anyone had seen the new judge. Lauren lowered the volume before the message finished. Vanessa watched her do it. No anger crossed her face. No fear. Only recognition. This was no longer confusion. It was a choice. Eric picked up the briefcase and noticed the red seal across its clasp. What's in here? He asked. Vanessa's voice became even quieter. A court-protected file you are not authorized to open. Eric looked at Lauren, and Lauren looked toward the silent camera above them. For the first time, uncertainty entered the garage. Vanessa checked her watch once more. 6 minutes remained. Preserve the recording, she said. Eric frowned. Why? Vanessa raised her head and met his eyes. Because very soon, both of you will be asked to explain why the judge was missing from her own courtroom. 20 minutes earlier, Vanessa Reed had entered the Belmont County Courthouse garage beneath a sky the color of wet steel. A steady morning rain followed her sedan down the concrete ramp, tapping against the roof until the sound faded beneath the fluorescent lights. She drove slowly past government vehicles and reserved spaces, reading each sign until she found number 12. Her name was printed beneath the courthouse seal in clean black letters. Judge Vanessa Reed. She parked, turned off the engine, and remained still for a moment. It was her first morning on the bench in this building, but the hearing ahead of her was not ceremonial. On the passenger seat rested a leather briefcase containing a court-protected file marked with a red seal. The documents inside concerned altered incident reports, missing recordings, and complaints that had been dismissed without meaningful review. Vanessa had spent most of the previous evening studying the material. Several names appeared repeatedly. One of them was Sergeant Lauren Pike. Vanessa did not know Lauren by sight, and she had no reason to expect their paths would cross before the hearing. She stepped from the car wearing a dark blue suit and low black shoes, carrying herself with the quiet focus of someone who had learned long ago that authority did not need to announce itself. Her judicial robe was already waiting upstairs in chambers. Her identification card remained inside the front pocket of her briefcase, beside a small notebook filled with questions for the attorneys. Camera G4 watched from the ceiling above Space 12. Its red light blinked once, then again, recording the empty lane, the rainwater beneath Vanessa's tires, and the first approach of Lauren Pike from nearly 40 feet away. Lauren had been speaking with Eric near an unmarked patrol vehicle when she noticed Vanessa. The conversation stopped. Her eyes moved from the sedan to the reserved sign, then back to the black woman standing beside the driver's door. She did not check the license plate. She did not call dispatch. She walked over with suspicion already settled across her face. Vanessa heard the measured strike of Lauren's shoes against the concrete and turned before the sergeant spoke. "This area is restricted," Lauren said. Vanessa glanced at the sign beside her car. "I am aware." The answer was polite, but Lauren treated it as resistance. She asked who the vehicle belonged to. Vanessa said it belonged to her. She asked why Vanessa had parked in a judicial space. Vanessa reached for her briefcase and replied that the space had been assigned to her. Lauren's gaze hardened. At that moment, Eric left the patrol vehicle and began walking toward them. Up on the 6th floor, Natalie Shaw placed the morning docket on the bench and checked the courtroom clock. It was 8:38. Judge Reed was expected in chambers within minutes. Down below, Vanessa opened her briefcase just far enough to retrieve her identification. The red seal on the protected file became visible. Lauren saw it. So did Eric. Neither of them asked the question that could have ended everything. Instead, Lauren looked at Vanessa's identification for less than a second and said, "This does not prove you belong here." Vanessa studied her expression, then looked toward camera G4. The red light continued blinking. "Then verify it," she said. Lauren did not reach for her radio. Eric did not read the name on the sign. And in that silent refusal, a routine morning began turning into evidence. Lauren held Vanessa's identification between two fingers, but her eyes never remained on it long enough to absorb the name. The photograph matched. The courthouse seal was clear. The title beneath it was impossible to misunderstand. Still, Lauren handed the card to Eric as though she had discovered something suspicious rather than something official. Eric glanced at the front, then looked past Vanessa toward the sedan. "Whose car is that?" he asked. "Mine," Vanessa answered. "And this parking space?" "Assigned to me." Eric looked at the sign beside the vehicle. The name Vanessa Reed stood less than 10 feet away, yet he did not compare it with the identification in his hand. Instead, he asked Vanessa whether she had borrowed the car, whether someone had given her the permit, and whether she understood that impersonating a court official was a serious offense. Each question carried the shape of an accusation. Vanessa listened without interrupting. Rainwater moved in thin streams along the garage floor, reflecting the pale ceiling lights. Somewhere beyond the concrete wall, an elevator bell sounded and faded. "You have my identification," she said. "You have the assigned space. You have a direct line to courthouse administration. Verify the information." Lauren folded her arms. "People who work here usually know how to cooperate." Vanessa met her gaze. "I am cooperating. I am asking you to follow procedure." The word procedure changed something in Lauren's expression. Her jaw tightened. To her, Vanessa's calm did not sound reasonable. It sounded challenging. Eric stepped closer to the briefcase and asked why. She was carrying sealed court material. Vanessa explained that the file was protected and scheduled for review that morning. She did not offer more. She was not permitted to. Eric took her refusal as proof that she was hiding something. You expect us to believe you walked into a restricted garage with a judge's permit, a judicial identification card, and confidential records, and all of it belongs to you. Vanessa looked toward the sign again. That is exactly what the evidence says. For a moment, no one spoke. The camera above them continued to record. Up on the 6th floor, Natalie Shaw checked the clock. It was 8:42. She called Chambers, then the security desk, asking whether Judge Reed had entered through the east garage. The question traveled through the building, but not yet to the two officers standing beside Space 12. Eric returned the identification to Lauren. She finally read the name aloud. Vanessa Reed. Then she looked at Vanessa with the same suspicion as before. That could still be a coincidence. Vanessa felt the meaning beneath the words. They had not begun with facts and reached a conclusion. They had begun with a conclusion and were now rejecting every fact that threatened it. She had seen that pattern in courtrooms, interviews, and reports written after the truth had already been decided. This is not an investigation, she said quietly. You are trying to make your assumption come true. Eric gave a short laugh, but Lauren did not. Her attention had shifted to the red seal visible inside the briefcase. She asked Vanessa to open it fully. Vanessa declined and explained that breaking the seal without authorization could compromise a pending hearing. Lauren reached for her radio, and for one brief second Vanessa believed she would finally request verification. Instead, Lauren reported a suspicious person in possession of restricted judicial materials. Vanessa watched the red light on camera G4 blink above them. The evidence had been offered. The truth had been visible. And both officers had chosen something else. The response from dispatch came through Lauren's radio in a wash of static. No additional unit was immediately available. And courthouse administration had not yet confirmed the report. Lauren acknowledged the message, then lowered the radio and looked at Vanessa as though the delay itself proved guilt. Eric moved between Vanessa and the elevator. Set the briefcase down, he said. Vanessa kept her voice level. The file is under court protection. You have no authorization to inspect it. Then you should have no problem waiting while we sort this out, Lauren replied. Vanessa glanced at her watch. It was 8:44 in the morning. 16 minutes remained before the scheduled hearing, but she was expected in chambers well before then. Upstairs, Natalie Shaw made another call to security. Thomas Green had begun checking the private entrances, puzzled by the absence of a judge who had built her reputation on arriving early. Down in the garage, Vanessa placed the briefcase beside her car, careful not to disturb the red seal. Eric leaned toward it. Lauren asked Vanessa to turn over her phone. Vanessa declined and requested a supervisor. The answer irritated Lauren more than any raised voice could have. You do not get to direct this conversation, she said. Vanessa looked at the nameplate above Lauren's badge, committing it to memory. I am not directing you. I am documenting whether you follow your own rules. The word settled into the cold air. Eric stepped closer to the briefcase and reached for the handle. Vanessa placed one hand over it. Do not open that file. His expression changed. Not because she had threatened him, but because she had refused to surrender the only thing he now wanted to control. Lauren instructed Vanessa to move away from the vehicle. Vanessa complied by one step, then another, keeping her hands visible. She repeated her request for verification. Lauren ignored it. Eric lifted the briefcase. The red seal caught against the clasp, bending but not yet breaking. Vanessa's eyes moved to camera G4. The small red light continued its steady rhythm. One blink. Then another. Every word. Every refusal. Every opportunity to stop. Place the case back on the ground, Vanessa said. Eric gave a thin smile. You are in no position to issue orders. From Lauren's radio came another message, clearer this time. Security, confirm arrival status for Judge Vanessa Reed. Courtroom 5 is waiting. Lauren froze. Eric looked at her. For a single second, the The garage became completely still except for the hum of the lights and the distant sound of rainwater moving through a drain. Vanessa watched recognition approach their faces, but Lauren pushed it away. "Different Vanessa Reed," she said quickly. Eric nodded, though neither of them believed the explanation as easily as before. Lauren reached for Vanessa's phone and placed it on the hood of the sedan. Eric shifted the briefcase beneath his arm. Vanessa did not resist. She simply looked at the permit on the windshield, the identification card still in Lauren's hand, and the reserved sign standing beside them. 3 matching names. 3 pieces of proof. 3 chances rejected. "This can still end as a mistake," Vanessa said. Lauren stared at her. "And if it does not?" Vanessa looked toward the elevator doors above the painted number 12. "Then it becomes a record." At that moment, the elevator bell sounded. The doors began to open, and footsteps entered the garage. The footsteps belonged to Caleb Morris, a courthouse maintenance worker pushing a small cart of cleaning supplies toward the service hallway. He slowed when he saw Vanessa beside the sedan, Lauren holding her identification, and Eric carrying the sealed briefcase. For a moment, Caleb looked ready to speak. Then Lauren turned toward him. "Keep moving," she said. Caleb lowered his eyes, but not before noticing the name on the reserved sign and the red light blinking above camera G4. He continued past them, each wheel of his cart clicking softly across the seams in the concrete. Vanessa watched him disappear through the service door. She did not blame him for his silence. Fear had a way of teaching ordinary people to look away, especially when authority had already chosen its target. Eric placed the briefcase on the hood of the sedan and examined the bent seal. "Last chance," he said. "Tell us where you got these documents." Vanessa answered with the same measured calm. "They were delivered to my chambers under court order. Opening that file will compromise a scheduled hearing." Lauren stepped closer. "You keep using official language as though that makes your story believable." "No," Vanessa said. "The evidence makes it believable." Eric pressed the clasp. The red seal tore with a faint paper snap that sounded louder than it should have in the empty garage. Vanessa closed her eyes for one brief second. Not from fear. From certainty. The moment the seal broke, the situation changed. Eric opened the case and removed the top folder. Across its cover were the words "Confidential Review of Officer Conduct and Evidence Preservation." Lauren reached for it before he could read further. Inside were incident summaries, dispatch records, and photographs from several complaints. One report described missing dashboard camera footage. Another showed that an official timeline had been changed after submission. Then Lauren saw her own name. Sergeant Lauren Pike appeared in a sealed appendix connected to a complaint filed by a black mother who had been detained outside an elementary school and later released without charges. Lauren's face lost its color. Eric noticed. "What is it?" he asked. Lauren closed the folder quickly. "Nothing." Vanessa looked directly at her. "You know exactly what it is." The radio on Lauren's shoulder sounded again. Courtroom 5 was requesting an immediate location update for Judge Reed. Lauren muted the device without answering. Eric stared at the broken seal, then at his wife. The confidence between them began to shift into something sharper. They were no longer trying to identify Vanessa. They were trying to protect themselves from what they had found. Lauren lowered her voice. "We report that she was found with restricted files and refused to cooperate." Eric hesitated. The camera recorded everything. Lauren looked up at G4. "Then we write that she became confrontational before the recording gives full context." Vanessa heard every word. She said nothing. Eric removed a notebook and began constructing a version of events that had never happened. Lauren dictated carefully, replacing questions with threats, cooperation with resistance, and evidence with suspicion. Vanessa stood beneath the blinking red light, listening as 2 officers transformed their assumptions into an official record. Then she looked toward the service hallway where Caleb had disappeared. The door remained slightly open. A shadow had stopped on the other side. Someone was still listening. And for the first time that morning, Lauren Pike was not the only person who knew her name was inside the file. Lauren directed Vanessa toward a small interview room beside the garage office while Eric carried the open briefcase and the unfinished report. The room contained a metal table, 2 chairs, and a narrow window facing the service corridor. Vanessa sat without protest. Her phone remained outside on the sedan, her identification rested in Lauren's pocket, and the protected file lay open beneath fluorescent light. To anyone passing through, the 2 officers appeared to control everything. That appearance pleased Eric. He sat across from Vanessa and began reading his report aloud, making small changes as Lauren suggested them. He wrote that Vanessa had entered a restricted area without authorization. He wrote that she had refused to provide reliable identification. He wrote that her behavior had caused concern for courthouse security. Each sentence moved farther from the truth, yet his voice grew more confident with every line. Vanessa listened carefully. "You are changing the order of events," she said. Eric looked up. "I am documenting what happened." "No," Vanessa replied. "You are documenting what you need people to believe." Lauren stood near the doorway, watching the clock. It was 8:48. 12 minutes remained before the hearing, but Natalie Shaw had already delayed the opening announcement twice. Upstairs, attorneys whispered about whether the new judge had been caught in traffic. Thomas Green checked the private elevator, then called the garage security desk. No one answered. In the interview room, Lauren picked up her radio as another message came through. Immediate confirmation requested. Judge Vanessa Reed has not arrived in courtroom 5. Eric stopped writing. Lauren pressed the transmit button but did not speak. Vanessa watched the hesitation settle between them. They now had the name from the identification card, the same name on the parking sign, and the same name echoing through the courthouse radio. Still, Lauren lowered the device and said, "The real judge could be somewhere else." Eric nodded too quickly. "Exactly." Vanessa looked through the narrow window. Beyond the glass, Caleb Morris stood near the service hallway with his cart turned sideways. He appeared to be checking a wall panel, but his attention remained fixed on the interview room. He had heard the radio. He had seen the sign. More importantly, he had witnessed the moment Lauren chose to ignore both. Eric resumed writing and added that Vanessa had been found with confidential material that did not belong to her. Lauren leaned over his shoulder and instructed him to include the phrase "possible impersonation of a judicial officer." Vanessa finally smiled, not with amusement, but with quiet disbelief. "You understand that every version you create must survive the evidence." Eric set down his pen. "The report is the evidence." "Only when no one checks it," Vanessa said. The sentence disturbed him more than he wanted to show. He looked toward camera G4 through the doorway, then toward the service corridor. Caleb immediately lowered his head. Lauren noticed the movement and stepped outside. "Did you see something?" she asked him. Caleb tightened his grip on the cart. For several seconds, fear held him silent. Then the elevator bell sounded again. This time, the doors opened and Thomas Green entered the garage at a hurried pace. Lauren turned toward him before Caleb could answer. Thomas scanned the numbered spaces, saw the sedan in space 12, and then saw Vanessa through the interview room window. His expression changed instantly. He moved closer, his voice carrying across the concrete. "Judge Reed." Eric rose so quickly that his chair scraped the floor. Lauren looked toward the elevator, still expecting someone else. Thomas walked past her, stopped at the glass, and stared at Vanessa. "Your Honor," he said, "the entire courtroom is waiting for you." For several seconds, no one moved. The words "Your Honor" seemed to remain suspended beneath the fluorescent lights, too clear to misunderstand and too final to dismiss. Lauren looked toward the elevator as though another person might still appear and rescue her from what Thomas had just said. Eric turned slowly toward Vanessa, then toward the identification card that Lauren had placed beside the open file. He picked it up with an unsteady hand and read every line this time. The photograph matched. The courthouse seal matched. The name matched the reserved parking sign less than 30 feet away. The title beneath the name left no room for another excuse. The Honorable Vanessa M. Reed. Thomas opened the interview room door and stepped aside. Judge Reed, I apologize. Courtroom 5 has been waiting since 8:45. Vanessa rose calmly. She did not rush toward freedom or demand immediate punishment. She looked first at the open briefcase, then at Eric's report, then at camera G4 beyond the doorway. The recording must be preserved, she said. Thomas followed her gaze and nodded. Lauren finally found her voice. Your Honor, there has been a misunderstanding. Vanessa turned toward her. An honest mistake ends when evidence appears. You ignored the permit, the identification, the radio call, and the name on the sign. Lauren opened her mouth, but no answer came. Eric attempted to explain that they had been protecting courthouse security. Vanessa looked at the broken red seal. You opened a protected file after being told not to. Then you created a report that changed the sequence of events. Eric glanced down at the pages in front of him. The confidence he had placed in those words only minutes earlier was gone. Vanessa asked Thomas to collect her telephone and secure the file without disturbing its contents. Then she looked toward Caleb, who still stood near the service hallway. Did you witness what happened here? She asked. Caleb swallowed and nodded. Yes, Your Honor. I saw most of it. Lauren stared at him, but the authority in her expression no longer carried the same weight. Caleb straightened. I also heard the radio message. Vanessa thanked him and asked Thomas to record his name for a formal statement. At 8:55, she entered the private elevator. 5 minutes remained before the hearing was scheduled to begin. Inside chambers, Natalie Shaw helped secure the damaged file while Vanessa put on the black judicial robe that had been waiting behind the door. Nothing about her face changed. Nothing about her voice changed. Only the setting did. At 9 o'clock, the side entrance to courtroom 5 opened. Thomas stepped forward and announced, "All rise." Every person stood. Attorneys closed their folders. Reporters lifted their eyes. Lauren and Eric had been directed to the front row while courthouse administrators determined what had delayed the session. They watched Vanessa enter beneath the state seal, cross the raised platform, and take the center seat behind the bench. The room fell silent. Vanessa arranged the documents before her and looked directly at the two officers. No anger. No triumph. Only the measured authority they had refused to recognize in the garage. She brought the gavel down once. Sergeant Lauren Pike. Officer Eric Pike. Please stand and state your names for the record. Lauren and Eric rose slowly from the front row, their names suddenly sounding different when spoken beneath the authority of the court. Vanessa allowed the silence to settle before continuing. She did not describe what had happened in the garage. She did not accuse them from the bench. Instead, she turned to Chief Judge Harold Bennett, who had entered through the side door after receiving an urgent message from Thomas Green. Chief Judge Bennett, a matter has occurred that may affect the integrity of this morning's hearing, Vanessa said. Because I am personally involved, I cannot make findings concerning the conduct of Sergeant Pike or Officer Pike. A quiet murmur moved through the courtroom. Lauren seemed to expect anger. Eric seemed to expect humiliation. Vanessa gave them neither. No judge should decide a case in which she is the victim, she continued. But every court has a duty to preserve the truth. She ordered the immediate protection of all recordings from camera G4, the elevator corridor, and the garage security desk. She directed Thomas to secure Eric's handwritten report, Lauren's radio traffic, Vanessa's identification card, and the open judicial file. Every item was to be logged, sealed, and transferred to an independent custodian. Chief Judge Bennett nodded and contacted Captain Monica Ellis of Internal Affairs from the courtroom. The scheduled hearing was postponed because the protected file had been opened without authorization. The delay affected attorneys, witnesses, and families who had traveled across the county, but Vanessa refused to allow convenience to outweigh fairness. The law cannot demand clean evidence from the public while accepting compromised evidence from its own officers, she said. Lauren tried to explain that courthouse security required quick decisions. Vanessa looked at her evenly. Quick decisions still require facts. Eric insisted that his report reflected what he remembered. Thomas placed the unfinished pages into an evidence envelope while the courtroom watched. The words on those pages described a woman who had refused identification, concealed her name, and behaved in a threatening manner. Camera G foreshowed something else. By noon, Captain Ellis had reviewed the first recording. Vanessa had displayed her identification. She had pointed toward the reserved sign. She had requested verification more than once. Lauren had heard dispatch searching for Judge Reed and lowered the radio. Eric had opened the protected file after receiving a clear warning. Caleb Morris provided a statement confirming what the camera could not capture from one angle. He admitted that fear had kept him silent at first, then explained how he had heard Lauren instruct Eric to change the sequence of events. The investigation expanded beyond the garage. Captain Ellis compared the report Eric had started that morning with reports from previous incidents involving the couple. A pattern emerged. Lauren initiated confrontations based on assumptions. Eric converted those assumptions into official language. Complaints disappeared behind phrases such as insufficient evidence and officer discretion. Recordings were often incomplete. Timelines shifted by several minutes. Vanessa received the preliminary findings in chambers that afternoon. She read them without satisfaction. This was not victory. It was responsibility. 2 officers had expected their uniforms to protect their version of the truth. Instead, the camera, the radio, the witness, and their own words had begun telling the story they tried to erase. 3 weeks later, the Belmont County Courthouse garage looked exactly as it had that rainy morning. The same fluorescent lights hummed above Space 12. The same concrete columns divided the rows. Camera GF continued blinking from the ceiling, now protected by a new evidence retention policy that no supervisor could override without written approval. Vanessa stood beside her sedan and studied the reserved sign bearing her name. Nothing about the place appeared different, yet the institution above it had begun to change. Lauren and Eric Pike remained suspended while an independent panel reviewed their conduct. Captain Monica Ellis had reopened 9 earlier complaints connected to the couple. 4 former complainants had already provided statements describing the same pattern Vanessa had experienced: immediate suspicion, ignored identification, rewritten timelines, and reports that turned calm questions into alleged resistance. Caleb Morris had testified as well. His voice had shaken at first, but he had told the truth. When asked why he waited, he answered that he had spent years believing silence was the safest choice. Vanessa understood. Systems built around fear did not survive only because powerful people abused authority. They also survived because ordinary people were taught that speaking carried a greater cost than looking away. Chief Judge Harold Bennett approved several reforms proposed by Vanessa. Courthouse security officers would now complete identity verification before making claims of impersonation when valid credentials were presented. Video from any detention inside the building would be automatically preserved. Officers related by marriage could not jointly manage a disputed encounter without an outside supervisor. Complaints involving missing recordings would receive independent review. None of those changes erased what happened, but they made repetition harder. That mattered more to Vanessa than public apologies. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered near the steps after the review panel released its preliminary findings. One journalist asked whether Vanessa felt vindicated now that the evidence supported her account. She paused before answering. "Vindication suggests this was only about me," she said. "It was not. I had a courtroom waiting, a title people recognized, and a camera that remained on. Many people have none of those protections." Another reporter asked what had changed when she entered courtroom 5 wearing her robe. Vanessa looked toward the tall courthouse windows. "Nothing about me changed," she said. only what they were finally willing to see. That afternoon, she returned to the bench for the rescheduled hearing. The restored file rested before her, properly sealed and independently verified. In the gallery sat several people whose old complaints had been reopened. Vanessa saw them watching quietly, uncertain whether the system would finally listen. She raised the gavel but did not bring it down immediately. She remembered the garage, the ignored identification, and the report written before the truth had been checked. Then she looked across the courtroom and spoke with the same calm voice she had used beneath the fluorescent lights. "This court will proceed on evidence, not assumption." The room became still. Justice had not arrived as revenge. It had arrived as a record preserved, a witness heard, and a rule changed before the next person stood alone. Lauren and Eric had believed the robe created Vanessa's authority. In truth, the robe had only exposed the dignity they had refused to recognize before she ever wore it.